Hi everyone, Canoopsy here, and this is the Samsung Galaxy Z Flip 3. Now I just finished reviewing the Galaxy Z Fold 3, and overall I liked that device and the form factor quite a bit. While the Flip on the other hand is completely different in terms of its design and overall experience. But of course that's not a bad thing, and this is a very unique device, and after a few weeks using this phone, I definitely have some thoughts. So first up, the design. When the phone is closed, it's pretty awesome. It's about the size of a sticky note, it's got some thickness of course, but not bad at all. It fits in a pants pocket, no problem of course, a shirt pocket, coat pocket, it's amazing. And while closed, the little screen is good for basic tasks like checking the time, notifications, controlling music, checking the weather, setting timers, starting voice memos. You can even take pictures and videos while the actual screen is closed. Having this little display is kind of like a smartwatch. It gives you basic information, keeps you updated, and it's pretty nice. Now when you flip it open, you get that big outer display, and it is a very tall display at 6.7 inches, 2640 by 1080, OLED, 120Hz, 1200 nits of peak brightness, and it's awesome. Everything looks great on this display. It gets super bright, it's colorful, excellent contrast, but you gotta get used to how tall it is. You see more content, so that's good, but things like watching videos, you have this super weird aspect ratio, and if you pinch to zoom in, you get an incredibly cropped video, so not great. And here's where things start to get a little bit awkward with this device form factor. So normally I don't mind the creases in folding phones, that's just how it is. But here the way it works, especially when scrolling, you feel the crease almost always. Thankfully you can't really see the crease unless you're in a very bright environment, but one negative here, the hinge can be a little bit loose at times, and the phone while you're walking or just using it can bend forward a little bit, and you kind of have a slightly folded phone you gotta push back. Versus the Fold here, the hinge is definitely not as tight, but that's just how it has to be. If you want to open this phone easily, the hinge definitely has to be a little bit more flexible and a little bit more loose. Now you can of course open the phone up with one hand, it just takes a little bit of work. It's completely doable and easier with two hands of course, but if you don't have two hands available, you can also just flip the phone open with one hand. Now this probably isn't good for long-term durability of the hinge because you're really flicking this thing open, but in some cases if you have to open up your phone, it's kind of the only way you can do it if you just have one hand available. If you're holding coffee with one hand, you're on public transit, you're holding groceries, this is kind of the only way you can open up your phone quickly with one hand, which you have to get used to. And of course you look like an absolute boss flipping this thing open, taking a call, replying to a message, but you gotta be careful. It's very easy to accidentally almost just throw this thing completely while opening it up. And yeah, we don't talk about calls that much these days with devices, but calls on here are a great experience. The speaker's nice and loud, people on the other end heard me perfectly well, and yes, closing the phone does end your call. Shout out Samsung. So yes, you do make trade-offs with the form factor of this device and the flippability. On one hand, it looks crazy cool and it gets super compact. On the other hand, it's a bit harder to open and actually just start using. Now the display has a plastic screen protector layer on top of the glass beneath, which you can remove, but to keep that glass safe, I'm going to avoid taking off this plastic for as long as I possibly can. When swiping from the side of the phone, there are these end caps which are kind of sharp and just unpleasant to run your finger along, but it's part of the technology for folding. The power button is also a little bit higher than I like, but it is a fingerprint scanner, it's fast and accurate, and all of the buttons here feel clicky and tactile. The phone is also water resistant this year. Okay, the cameras. The selfie camera here is actually pretty good and definitely much better than the Z Fold 3's inner selfie camera situation. It's just a standard selfie camera and shots are good. The selfie camera also shoots 4K video up to 60 frames per second, and you're hearing the microphone quality as well right now. Let me know what you think. The rear camera setup is solid as well. Just like the Z Fold 3, not the best cameras in the game, but very good. You have dual 12 megapixel cameras, one is standard and one is ultra wide with a 123-degree field of view. There's excellent dynamic range, beautiful colors, photos are sharp, crisp, and during the day, shots are generally great. At night and in the dark, it's kind of a different story. Like, shots are passable, but just not amazing. There's sometimes some crazy lens flares, colors look a little bit off, they just don't look that great for nighttime shots. Some of Samsung's other phones definitely do a better job. 4K video is also pretty nice here too on both of the cameras. Shots are smooth, stable, colors are good, audio is crisp. Samsung does an excellent job with video on their devices. It's super underrated. You can also kind of use the phone in this camcorder flip screen style mode if you're weird like me, or even prop up the phone using itself as a tripod. That feature is pretty sweet, great for photos or videos, it's a very cool feature. Okay, so that's the camera experience on the Z Flip 3. Is it the best set of cameras Samsung has ever shipped? No, probably not, but it is very good. Now, let's talk about performance with this device. So this phone has top-of-the-line specifications like the Snapdragon 888, 8GB of RAM, 128 or 256GB of storage, and those are some pretty standard high-end specifications. And as you expect, performance is, well, amazing here. Just using the phone, things feel super fast and smooth, especially complemented by that 120Hz display. Daily performance opening and closing apps, it's awesome. Multitasking with this tall display is definitely a treat, and gaming is also solid too. The phone has flagship specs and it performs like a flagship phone, because it kinda is. Samsung has also done a good job scaling its own apps to fit this very tall display, and most third-party apps scale pretty well too. There are some unusual scaling issues, but that's just how it is with such a large display. And this phone of course runs Samsung's One UI on top of Android, and that means there's a whole bunch of features, so many customization options, and it's actually quite pleasant to use. If you've been turned off of Samsung's software experience in the past, I promise you're gonna really enjoy it this time. They've really made some excellent gains with their software. Now, battery life is a concern that many people have brought up with the Z Flip 3, and yeah, it's not amazing, but it's one of those things that just come along with the form factor. You see, the phone needs to be thin and light, accommodate the hinge and all the other tech, and the battery, which is 3300 mAh, isn't the best for performance. So battery life is pretty inconsistent, and in the early days of using this phone, it wasn't pretty. I start most days around 7 or 8 o'clock AM, I'm on my phone as soon as I wake up, and I had to stop and charge the phone in the early evening at around 6 or 7 o'clock on most days, as the battery was getting pretty low. Now I do use my phone quite a bit for taking calls, replying to emails, taking photos, watching videos, and trying to survive with the battery on this device wasn't always a great experience. Some days I could make it from the morning to later on in the evening, but those were lighter days, and the battery drain on standby with this phone, it definitely does drain battery a little bit, even if you're not even using it. But something interesting started happening though. After a few days using this phone and being anxious about the battery life, my usage habits actually started changing. Instead of watching YouTube and other videos on my phone, I'd watch them on my tablet or TV. I even started opening my phone less and sticking to using the outer screen for as much as I possibly could. I even took less photos with this phone, not because of the battery anxiety, but also because of the extra steps of taking out the phone, opening it up, to preview and capture shots. And now the battery easily gets me through a full day of usage from the early morning to the late evening when I go to sleep, no problem. Because of course I am using my phone less, and that's not really fair to say and even compare it to a regular day of usage because, well, I am using my phone for less tasks than I would with a normal phone. But it is something that happened to me over time, just naturally. If this is your daily phone, you might just naturally start using it less. It happened to me. If you're a digital minimalist, maybe you want your tech experience to be as uninvasive as possible, maybe you want to use your phone less, well, this device might be for you. The fact you need to open the phone up to do more than very simple tasks means it's a decision to use your phone rather than just a habit. And of course, you're going to want to conserve the already minimal battery. This phone also has 15-watt fast charging, which today isn't super fast, but it's decent, wireless charging and reverse wireless charging, but with this battery life, I'm not sharing any battery. Okay, so the Galaxy Z Flip 3 is definitely a weird device. It took me a while to understand and get used to. Flip phones made a lot of sense back in the day because pretty much you were just taking calls or texts. Today we're doing a hell of a lot more, and the form factor is so unusual from most normal phones that we're used to that it really changes the whole experience. It changes how I use my phone and also how long I use my phone. Having a tiny phone that can become a big phone is a super cool feature, but that being said, I don't really know if the Flip is personally for me, and I'm just not completely ready for this experience long term. Maybe one day, but for now, if I'm going with a folding phone, it's probably going to be the Galaxy Z Fold 3. So those are my thoughts on the Galaxy Z Flip 3, but I want to hear your thoughts on this device in the comments down below. Do you like this phone? Do you prefer the Fold? Are you just anti-folding phones altogether? Did you buy this device? What has your experience been like? I want to hear your thoughts. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe, and thank you for watching.